Dear brothers and sisters, may the peace of Christ be with you. Today, I like to share with you my experience of faith. I know that the Bible has a definition of faith from the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 11, beginning from verse 1. The church also defines faith in so many places from the Catechism of the Catholic Church and in so many writings of the church, especially beginning from 145 up to 150, especially 150. In Catechism of the Catholic Church, number 150, we are taught that faith is a personal adherence, that is, a personal union, a personal attachment, a personal consent that man gives to God. But today, I'll be sharing with you some few things, some of my personal understanding of what faith is actually about. Of course, as we were taught as little boys, little girls, little children, we know that faith is a supernatural gift. It's a gift from God. In fact, in Igbo Catechism, we say that okukwe bụ onyinye mmụọ Chukwu ji eme ọgọ. It's a supernatural gift that God gives to those that He loves. Okukwe bụ onyinye mmụọ Chukwu ji eme ọgọ. Nke na-enyere anyị aka ikwere unu. That helps us to believe. That helps us to accept what God reveals to us. If you look at Hebrews chapter 11 from verse 1 and following, you get more on this. But I like to take this one by one for us to really appreciate our faith. Because faith for me is not just a supernatural gift, but faith is a supernatural gift, a gift that God gives to us. It's like a gift of access, entrance, like you're going for a party and you have the ticket. If you don't have the ticket, you will not be allowed inside the party. Something like that. So, faith is like a ticket that God gives to us in order to enter into what? Into relationship with Him. If you look at Matthew chapter 13, you will see clearly where Jesus talked about the parable of the mustard seed. That parable, for me, speaks volumes about what faith is. It is God who plants this faith, because faith is actually the presence of God in us. It is God who planted His presence in us. If you look at Genesis chapter 2, from verse 6 and 7, you understand that when God molded man, we were just ordinary clay until God breathed into man the breath of life. And that is where God, printed Himself in the human person. So that is the gift of divine presence in every human person. Actually, when we die, that's the separation of this presence and the ordinary body, the ordinary flesh. But this is not the point I like us to really think about today. I like us to think about faith as divine presence in us. This faith is present in everyone, but it grows in different ways. Baptism, as we believe, is one of the ways that the church initiates or plants faith in us. And like mustard seed, it keeps on growing and growing and growing until that moment when it matures. And if you look at that Matthew's account of the parable of the mustard seed, you will see what faith is actually. That faith is not just praying, but faith has a lot to do in our interpersonal relationship. I will come to that. So the first thing that we talk about faith is that it's a supernatural gift. It's a gift that God gives to us. Nobody merits faith, but it's a gratuitous gift that God gives to us. He gives it as a gift. Not that we merit it. No, we don't merit it, but God gives that as a gift. The second thing that I like us to think about is that faith is a journey with God. Remember the story of Abraham, how he abandoned his former place and started walking with God to a place he did not know. So faith is a journey, and of course this journey is full of uncertainties, but one thing is certain, that the presence of God is with us. Faith is a relationship, and this is the most important part of this faith. Faith is a relationship because sometimes we just define faith as a supernatural gift, And it sounds so utopic, like it's in the air. But if we understand that faith is a relationship, then we know that it's just like a covenant. There is there should be a communication. There should be a communication, which means that one of the ways we make our faith to grow is to enter into communication with God, a constant prayer, constant reflection on the Word of God. So faith is a relationship. It's not just a supernatural gift, but it's also fundamentally a relationship between the divine and the human. And it is God who is the divine that gives us the opening. The gift of faith demonstrates generosity of God, divine generosity, because the heart of God is magnanimous. So God gives us this opportunity for us to enter into relationship with Him. It's not as if we merit it, no. So faith is also a total surrender, total submission. We give ourselves over to God. And that is actually where the reality or the concept of trust comes into faith. So faith is that total surrender. I surrender myself to God because I know that He knows even the end from the beginning. I know that God has absolute dominion, authority, power, and sovereignty. He has that perfect knowledge of everything. So I surrender myself to Him. And this is also why faith is a total dependence on God. When God called Abraham from his original place, Abraham depended on God. If you see someone who has faith and the person is depending on his or her human intelligence or strength, that person has no faith. Faith is demonstrated when we have a total radical dependence on God, not on my human will, not on my human strength, but totally on the presence of God, because we believe that God can do this for us. So faith is a total dependence, our personal total dependence on God. And that's why we also consider faith to be a human act. Faith is not an act of man, because if we call faith an act of man, it means that we are not responsible for this faith. But as a human action, it means we freely accepted it. We have the knowledge that it is the presence of God in us. We gave our consent and all that. So it is not something that you don't know about. You freely accept the faith, just as many people will freely reject the faith. So faith is recognizing that God is my origin, the source, my all and all. And that's why faith is so much connected to humility. Without humility, you cannot have faith, because humility makes you to understand that you are nothing except that you are ordinary soil. Humility comes from the word humus, and humus is soil. So before someone will say, I have faith, the person must be humble enough to recognize that without God, that he or she is nothing. And that's what faith is. Faith is understanding that without God, I am nothing. And that's connected to humility. So faith is also trust in God. As I said, total trust in God, not in any other thing, not in your fears, not in your pessimism, not in your presumptions. No, none of that. But faith is a total trust, a total dependence on God. Faith is also a total confidence in God. Having confidence in God, it's not like you say, oh, I'm the one in charge of my life. It's not like that. But we build our confidence. I made a video where I talked about how to build your confidence and how to make your confidence to blossom. That's an act of faith. So faith is also a total obedience to God. What does obedience mean? Obedience means the dethronement of the human will and the enthronement of the will of God. Obedience means making God the number one in our lives, making God, to take the preeminent position in our life. That's what faith is. Faith is having a total obedience to God. And that's why if you look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, you will see that the two models for faith is in the Old Testament is Abraham. In the New Testament is our Blessed Mother Mary. If you look at the life of Abraham, he depended on God. He followed God. Wherever God asked him to come, he went. And he almost sacrificed his son Isaac as a demonstration of his faith in God. Because our faith can be tested, but the testing of our faith, usually from God, is to make our faith to be stronger. Remember, at this point, there's a difference between test and tempt. God can test us to make our faith to be stronger. Just like you write examination, you are not meant to be pushed down or to fail, but you write examination to show your competence and you will be promoted. But tempting is the one done by the demon, because tempting has the objective of pushing you down. Actually, they have the same word. The Greek word is the same, peraizo, but they are not the same in English translation. So, in the New Testament, we see our Blessed Mother Mary as the model of faith, because Mary said to the archangel and, of course, to God, "Be it done to me according to your will." So it's the dethronement of human will, filled with appetites and retaliations and all kinds of passions and emotions. Dethronement of that will and the enthronement of the will of God, making God to be the number one in our lives, that God controls our thoughts, our words, our actions. That's what faith is about. So faith is also listening, listening to the word of God, because the word of God is very necessary, in the cultivation of our faith. As I said before, faith is a grace. Faith is human action. Faith is having certainty. Faith is connected to freedom. But we have to build this faith every day. I like to share with you also that faith is not the absence of troubles and crises and challenges, but faith is our ability to hold on to God, even in the moments of these challenges and struggles and trials. I remember what Martin Luther King Jr. said, the one of the United States. He said that faith is taking the first step even when you cannot see the entire staircase. Faith is about abandoning ourselves. As I said in the beginning, faith is about submitting ourselves. You abandon yourself in the hand of God because you believe that God has absolute capability, absolute sovereignty, dominion, authority, and power to protect you and to make sure that nothing comes to you, to harm you. That's what faith is. Faith is a total surrender of oneself to God. If you look at the parable of the mustard seed, you will see the functionality and the practicality that is embedded in faith. Like someone who has faith, how you know someone who has faith is through the actions of that person. It's not just when we say holiness, you keep your hand this way, but we're talking about holiness as manifested in our relationship with one another. If you look at that parable of the mustard seed, you will see that towards the end, Jesus talks about the mustard tree welcoming all kinds of birds, becoming a shelter for the birds. That's actually what every Christian who has faith in God should be. We should be like shelter to those who are broken, those who are wounded emotionally, those who are passing through a lot of emotional crisis and all that. And as Christians with faith, we should be welcoming, accepting, and accommodating. And when you look at the corporal works of mercy, all of them from the beginning, visiting the prisoners until, helping in the burial of someone who may have died, you will see that all those acts of mercy, they are manifestations of the person who has faith. Thank you very much for listening to this reflection, and I hope this may help you to build your faith. So remember that when you have crisis, it does not mean you don't have faith. Actually, it means you have faith, because the devil will not tempt you if you don't have faith. If you don't have faith, the devil already knows you belong to him. But for the fact that you are having trials and challenges and struggles, it is because the devil wants to tempt you and push you down. Do not allow that. Having faith does not mean that you are exempted from sufferings and misfortunes and sickness. No. But having faith means you have a relationship with God. God bless you.